Good evening, my friends. Tonight I want to ask you something important, and I don't want you to brush past it. I want you to truly think about it before we go any further. How much time each day are you genuinely living from the state of your wish fulfilled? Not just imagining it for a few moments, not wishing for it, not daydreaming about it. I mean truly living as the version of yourself who already has it. Be completely honest. Because the answer to that single question reveals why certain manifestations entered your life while others still feel distant. It explains why some desires move quickly and others seem frozen in place for months, even years. Most people, if they are honest, spend maybe an hour in the desired state, sometimes less. Usually it happens at night, that quiet moment before sleep when you finally relax enough to feel the reality of your desire. You visualize, you feel the emotions. For a little while, it feels natural, it feels done. In those moments, you believe. You fall asleep wrapped inside that feeling. But then the next morning arrives. Within minutes, the state disappears. You open your phone, you remember your bills, you notice your circumstances, your relationship status, your body, your current reality suddenly rushes back into your awareness. And before the day has properly started, you've already returned to the same identity you've been trying to escape. The old state quietly takes control again. So think about it carefully. You spend 1 hour embodying your desire, but the remaining 23 hours identifying with the absence of it. Then you wonder why nothing changes. That is the part so many people fail to understand. Tonight we are going to change that completely, not by adding another complicated technique or some secret ritual. This is about understanding manifestation at a deeper level. It's about realizing what truly creates results and how to remain in your assumption consistently instead of occasionally. Because the goal is not to visit the desired state for a few moments. The goal is to live there continuously. Here is the truth that changes everything. Your consciousness never shuts off. It is not something you activate only during meditation or visualization. It is operating every second of the day. Every thought, every reaction, every feeling, every assumption is contributing to the reality you experience. Whether you realize it or not, you are always manifesting. You manifested this morning. You manifested while driving, eating, working, scrolling through your phone, speaking to people, even during moments when manifestation wasn't on your mind at all. The creative process never pauses. It doesn't wait until you sit down for your nightly routine. It does not stop because you became distracted or emotionally overwhelmed. It is always responding to the dominant state you occupy. And that brings us to the only question that truly matters. Which state dominates your consciousness most of the time? For most people, it is still the state tied to their current reality. The same familiar identity, the same emotional habits, the same repeated thoughts they have practiced for years. They briefly step into the state of the wish fulfilled, but quickly return to being the person who still wants, waits, struggles, and hopes. Then they feel confused when their external world continues reflecting that version back to them. But manifestation is not based on temporary moments. It responds to consistency. It reflects who you repeatedly are, not who you pretend to be for 1 hour before bed. If your dominant identity is still someone who feels incomplete, unsupported, unloved, unsuccessful, or lacking, then reality must continue echoing that state back to you. Not because life is against you, but because the law responds with precision. Now, before we move deeper into how to maintain your assumption all day long, there is something you need to understand clearly. I call it the default state. Your default state is the identity your mind naturally returns to whenever you stop consciously directing it. It is your automatic setting, the emotional home your consciousness falls back into without effort. And for most people, that default state is still connected to limitation, fear, doubt, and old circumstances. That is why maintaining the new assumption feels difficult at first. The moment attention slips, the mind automatically returns to what feels most familiar. Not necessarily what you want, but what you have practiced the longest. And until the desired state becomes your new default, you will continue moving back and forth between belief and doubt, between creation and old patterns. Neville's vision teaches that the secret is not forcing yourself to feel positive every second. The real transformation happens when the desired identity becomes so natural that you no longer need to fight to hold it. It becomes your resting state, your automatic response, your new normal. And once that happens, manifestation no longer feels like work. It becomes inevitable. Your default state is your inner resting place. It is the mental position your mind automatically returns to without effort. And for most people, that place is not the state of already having their desire. It is the old identity they have repeated for years. The familiar emotions, the same limitations, the same stories, the same reactions shaped by past experiences and long-held beliefs. Imagine a rubber band stretched away from its center. While you are actively pulling it, it stays extended. But the moment you loosen your grip, it snaps right back to where it naturally rests. That is exactly what happens with your consciousness. During your visualization or SATS practice, you temporarily move into the state of the wish fulfilled. You feel it, you believe it, but as soon as attention drifts, life interrupts, or exhaustion sets in, your mind pulls itself back to its old center. That is why so many manifestations seem delayed. It is not because your method is failing, it is not because your affirmations are weak or because the universe ignored you. The real issue is that your inner default has not changed yet. Your old reality is still home base, and the true work is not about forcing yourself to hold the new state harder during practice. The deeper transformation comes from changing where the center itself exists. You must make the fulfilled version of yourself feel more natural than the version connected to lack. You must become so familiar with the assumption of already having it that your mind automatically returns there whenever attention relaxes. That is the meaning of living in the assumption 24 hours a day. It is not exhausting yourself by watching every thought with fear. It is not mentally fighting yourself all day long. It is about changing your natural identity. The wish fulfilled becomes your normal state, your emotional home, your automatic way of being. Now let's talk about the most important part of your day, the morning, because this is where most people unknowingly lose control before the day even begins. You wake up after your SATS practice still carrying traces of the feeling from the night before. There is calmness, there is certainty, and in those first moments after sleep, your mind is still open and impressionable. The old patterns have not fully taken over yet. Those first few seconds between sleep and full awareness are incredibly powerful. But most people waste them instantly. They grab their phone, they check notifications, social media, messages, headlines, finances. They immediately begin thinking about responsibilities, stress, problems, and unfinished situations. Before they even leave the bed, they have already surrendered their consciousness back to the old reality. So here's what I want you to do instead. The moment you wake up, do nothing for 60 seconds. Don't move, don't check anything. Before a single thought about the outside world appears, settle directly into the feeling of already being the person you desire to become, not imagining it from a distance, not wishing for it, simply being it. Let that identity rest over you naturally, the same way warmth settles over the body beneath a blanket. No force, no struggle, no performance. You are not beginning a technique in that moment. You are stepping into recognition. You are remembering the version of yourself you have chosen to embody. Just 60 seconds. And this next part matters deeply. When you finally rise from bed, do not rise as someone trying to get their desire. Rise as the person who already possesses it. That difference changes everything. Because when your day begins from the energy of chasing, every thought and action quietly carries the vibration of absence. You move through life wanting, hoping, reaching, waiting. And wanting itself keeps reinforcing the belief that the desire is still somewhere outside of you. But when you begin the day as the version of yourself who already has it, your entire presence shifts naturally. Your body language changes, your tone changes. The way you walk, speak, think, and interact feels different without effort. Not because you are pretending, but because the assumption underneath your behavior has changed. This is how you program the direction of your entire day. And this simple morning shift must become consistent. Not only on the days you feel inspired, not only when you are emotionally high, every single day, tired or energized, busy or relaxed, 7 days a week without excuses. 60 seconds may sound small, but repeated daily, those moments begin reshaping your entire internal foundation. Over time, the fulfilled state stops feeling temporary. It starts becoming your new default. And as you continue through your day, there is another process happening constantly beneath your awareness. Something most people never stop to notice. And now we reach one of the most difficult truths that people often resist, even after they understand everything else. Because even when you have the knowledge, even when you have the morning practice, even when you are aware of your inner dialogue and actively trying to guide it, there is still something deeper operating underneath it all. Something quieter, something more subtle, something far more powerful than technique or discipline. And that is identification with the old self. This is the point where many people begin to struggle. Not because they lack belief and not because they lack sincerity, but because the old identity feels overwhelmingly real. It is not abstract, it is not distant, it is immediate. It is reinforced constantly by what you see, what you hear, what you remember, and what you have experienced repeatedly over time. Your senses confirm it, your environment reflects it, your past seems to validate it. And because of that constant reinforcement, the mind quietly insists, this is who I am, this is what is true, this is what I have always been. But that assumption, as convincing as it feels, is not truth, it is repetition. And repetition, no matter how long it has been running, does not become truth just because it feels familiar. You are not your current thoughts. You are not your emotional reactions. You are not the story your memory keeps replaying. You are the awareness in which all of these experiences appear. And within that awareness, you always have the ability to choose which state you continue to occupy. The challenge is that most people do not recognize this in real time. So when they slip back into the old identity, they assume they have failed. They assume they have lost progress. They assume something is wrong with them or their practice. But in reality, nothing has been lost. What has happened is simply a return to familiarity. And familiarity is powerful. It pulls you back, not because it is correct, but because it is well worn. It is a pattern that has been repeated enough times to feel automatic. So every time you unconsciously return to the old story, you are not proving it right. You are simply rehearsing what is already known. This is why persistence becomes far more important than perfection. The work is not about never drifting. That is not realistic for anyone. The work is about what happens when you notice the drift. Do you collapse into frustration? Do you judge yourself? Do you decide the process is not working? Or do you simply, quietly, without emotional disturbance, return? That moment of return is the entire practice. Because the moment you become aware that you have slipped back into the old state, something important has already happened. Awareness itself has broken identification. You are no longer fully inside the old story if you can observe it. That awareness creates space, and in that space, choice returns. You are no longer reacting unconsciously, you are selecting consciously again. Neville's vision emphasizes this point deeply. The new identity is not something you force into existence through constant effort or strain. It is something you return to repeatedly until repetition makes it natural, until it becomes more familiar than the old identity ever was, until it begins to feel like the default way of being. And this is where the real shift happens, not in dramatic moments, but in quiet repetition. Each return strengthens the new state. Each moment of awareness loosens the grip of the old identity. Each time you choose the desired state again, you are not starting over. You are reinforcing direction. And slowly, almost invisibly at first, something begins to change. You will still see the same world, but your relationship to it begins to shift. The emotional charge around circumstances begins to weaken. The old reactions lose intensity. The new assumptions begin to feel more stable, more grounded, more natural. And then one day, without any dramatic announcement, you notice something subtle but undeniable. Life does not feel the same. Not because the external world has suddenly transformed, but because your internal position has shifted so consistently that reality is now being interpreted through a different center. Things begin to arrange differently, opportunities feel different, your responses are different, your assumptions feel more dominant than your fears. And at that point you realize something very important. You were never trying to change the world directly, you were changing the state from which the world is experienced. And when that state changes, everything that reflects it must eventually follow. When contradictory evidence shows up, this is where everything gets tested. You might be maintaining your assumptions steadily. Your inner dialogue is improving. Your morning practice is consistent. Things feel like they are finally shifting. And then reality delivers something sharp. A bill arrives. The bank balance is lower than expected. A message doesn't come. Results fall short. A relationship ends or someone moves on. Something concrete appears that directly contradicts everything you've been building internally. And in that exact moment, something very old wakes up inside you. Panic, doubt, fear, that immediate pull back into the familiar story. The old identity rushes in with force, convincing you that everything you were practicing was just imagination. And in that pressure, most people collapse back into reaction. They analyze, they spiral, they emotionally engage with the appearance and forget the state entirely. I knew it wasn't working. And just like that, their inner alignment dissolves. But here is where understanding becomes essential. You are not being asked to ignore what you see or deny what is in front of you. You are not being told to fake positivity or pretend there are no real-world issues. That is not the point at all. The key insight is this: what you are seeing is not current creation, it is residual expression. If consciousness is the source of experience, then everything showing up externally is always delayed. It reflects what was assumed before, not what is being assumed now. It is not present consciousness, it is past consciousness made visible. So the situation in front of you is not new truth, it is old momentum. The low bank balance is not a statement about your current identity. It is the leftover imprint of a former state. The silence from someone is not confirmation of failure. It is the unfolding of a timeline already set in motion before your inner shift took place. This is why the appearance should never be given authority over the assumption. So in that moment of contradiction, the response becomes simple but powerful. I see this, I acknowledge it, but I do not accept it as my current state. Not as denial, not as avoidance, but as clarity. Because this is the point most people misunderstand. Contradictory evidence is not rejection, it is delay. It is the gap between a past state and a new one taking form. And in that gap, your stability matters more than anything else. Every time you remain in your chosen state while facing opposite evidence, you are not being passive. You are being decisive at the level of consciousness. You are choosing origin over appearance. You are declaring what is real within you rather than reacting to what is temporary outside you. And that decision carries more creative weight than any visualization or affirmation. Then comes the evening practice. At the end of the day, instead of judging yourself or replaying everything that went wrong, you observe. You review your inner consistency. Where did I stay aligned today? Where did I drift? What triggered the shift? And most importantly, how quickly did I return? Every return is progress. Every correction is evidence of strengthening awareness. Then you move into your night practice gently. No pressure, no force, just settling into the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. Letting it become natural again, letting it become familiar again. And then you fall asleep from that state, not into worry, not into doubt, but into completion. Because sleep is not empty time. The subconscious does not switch off. It continues working without interruption, organizing internal impressions into external conditions. Whatever state is most deeply impressed at the moment of sleep becomes the foundation it works with through the night. If you sleep in fear, it continues building patterns of fear. If you sleep in abundance, it continues organizing experiences of abundance. If you sleep in fulfillment, it continues shaping reality from fulfillment. So even sleep becomes part of your continuous assumption. And when your entire day, from morning awareness to nighttime surrender, is aligned with the same inner state, reality has no choice but to begin reflecting that consistency outwardly. Neville's vision teaches that persistence is not about forcing belief. It is about returning again and again until the assumption becomes stronger than the appearance. You are not stepping away from your desired state, you are actually going deeper into it. And this is where the real journey reveals itself, because the purpose is never to keep practicing forever. The purpose is something far more natural, far more complete: identity. There are two stages in this process. In the first stage, you are in conscious effort. You are someone who deliberately chooses a state. You become aware of your inner dialogue. You guide your mornings with intention. You notice when you drift and you gently bring yourself back. You set reminders, you correct yourself, you stay alert. This stage matters. It builds awareness, it creates direction, it trains your consciousness to stop moving on autopilot. But if you continue, something subtle begins to change underneath all of that effort. The repetition starts to sink deeper than thought. The new assumption stops feeling like something you are doing and slowly starts feeling like something you are being. You no longer feel like someone trying to align with abundance. You begin to feel like someone who is already abundant. You no longer try to reach love. You begin to feel naturally loved. The state shifts from practice to presence. And when that happens, something important clicks. The identity you are consciously choosing becomes more familiar than the identity you used to live from automatically. The new state becomes your reference point, your inner baseline, your natural emotional ground. At that point, everything changes. Because you are no longer forcing yourself into a state, you are simply expressing who you already are. The need for constant effort dissolves. The monitoring softens. The reminders become unnecessary. You are not maintaining something fragile anymore. You are living from something stable. This is the real goal. Not perfect discipline, not endless mental control, but a genuine shift in identity where the fulfilled state is no longer something you return to. It is something you naturally rest in. So here's the invitation. Begin with 7 days. Not as experimentation, not as casual practice, as commitment. 7 days of waking in the desired state before anything else enters your awareness. 7 days of noticing your inner dialogue and choosing to think from the version of you who already has it. 7 days of checking your state throughout the day and gently returning whenever you drift without self-criticism. 7 days of holding your assumption even when circumstances appear to contradict it, especially then. And 7 nights of falling asleep from the feeling that it is already done. And if you truly stay consistent with that, something will begin to shift. Not dramatically at first, but noticeably. The new state will feel less like effort, more like familiarity. You will catch yourself less, and when you do drift, you will return more quickly, more naturally, with less resistance. This is how the center begins to move. Extend it, continue. And over time, something remarkable happens. The practice stops feeling like practice. It becomes your way of being. And when that point arrives, you will understand something very clearly. You are no longer trying to get anything. You are simply living as the version of yourself where it is already true. Drifting will still happen. It always does. No one escapes that. But mastery was never about perfection. It was always about return. The moment you notice you've shifted away, and instead of reacting, you calmly return, that is the entire work. No guilt, no story, no spiral, just awareness and return. That return, repeated consistently, quietly reshapes everything. Because over time, the new identity becomes stronger than the old habit. The fulfilled state becomes more natural than lack ever was. And what once felt like effort becomes your baseline. At that point, nothing is being attracted or manifested in a strained way. Life simply begins to reflect what you already are. So the real instruction is simple. Don't try to be perfect. Just keep returning. Return to the assumption, return to the state, return to the version of you where it is already done. And do that often enough, long enough, calmly enough, until returning is no longer necessary. Because it is no longer a return. It is home.